This is Karen Ramsey, and I thank you so much for coming to my YouTube channel and being so faithful to me over the past years since my YouTube channel started in about 2012. I've been off for a while. I hosted an online summit called the Power of Raw Food Summit, and it took up all of my time. And I hope that some of you got to watch, or actually to listen. It was an audio summit, and I interviewed many very well-known vegan medical doctors and raw food experts from around the world. And it was very exciting to bring this information to a wide audience. And so I'm back. And I'd like to tell you a bit about my own story of going to raw food 24 years ago. So this is my 24th year, and I have remained passionate to raw foods. But many people go off of raw foods. They try it and they say that it didn't work, or they don't feel well. And I want to tell you some of the earlier mistakes that I made that I know could have gotten me into trouble if I continued on the same path. And hopefully you can avoid some of these same issues in your raw food health journey. So number one was leafy green vegetables. When I first came to a raw vegan lifestyle, I was eating a lot of fruit. I was also eating a lot of nuts, and sometimes I was eating them together, which is not a great food combining for those foods. Fruit really needs to be eaten by itself. So that was also something I'm not going to go into depth about today, but a mistake that I made. So I want to get back to the leafy greens. I really did not eat enough of them. And many people who I work with today who come to, reach out to me and tell me that they've been doing raw food and that they're not doing well, I find that they're not adding enough leafy greens into their raw food lifestyle. So the first couple of years, especially in the wintertime, I was getting cracks, like bad sores on the corners of my mouth. And I thought it was just because it was the cold winter time. But actually, at a certain point, when I started to add more kale and spinach and collards and dandelion and nettles and other wild leafy greens, after just a few weeks, those cracks, which I thought had been just from the winter, they went away, and I never had them again any other winter following that. And that was, that was like 2 decades ago. And so I know as a fact that that was a mineral deficiency and that I wasn't getting enough leafy greens. I was only having a small salad during the day. Now, if you live in a tropical place and you have fruit trees growing in your yard and they're falling to the ground ripe, maybe you could get enough minerals in your fruit. But for those of us who live in northern climates, we can't depend on getting enough minerals from the imported fruit that we get at the store. All right? We don't have access to enough fruit, even if we're growing things like, I know figs can grow well in a northern climate, but most of the fruit that I eat is imported. So that's number one, is getting in enough dark leafy greens. And you should probably be eating about 2 pounds a day. The next thing is that I was eating fruit, but there were times when I wasn't getting enough high-calorie fruits for my weight needs, and I got really light. Like I went from like 112 pounds to 85 pounds. And even my father, who grew up as a vegan and raw food eater, even he was telling me that maybe I needed to go back to cooked food, that raw food wasn't working for me. So I found that when I added more calories from fruit, and added on, I put more bananas in my smoothie, and I would eat other calorie-dense fruits during the day, either in my smoothies or as my snack. And then another part of that fruit issue, though, was dried fruit, because I used to give my kids a lot of dried dates and figs when we came to a raw food lifestyle, instead of the junk food vegan food or the junk food mainstream food. So of course dried fruit is better, but not to be eating huge amounts every day. And so that is also a problem. And I see many people who come to raw food who have dental issues, and that is very often from eating an abundance of dried, sticky fruit, which can actually, it's healthier than candy once it's in your body, but it's not so good for the teeth. And it's also a very concentrated sugar. So I really began to believe over the years that the best way to eat your fruit is in the whole form, with all of its fiber intact, and certainly not as concentrated as dry fruit. That's only as a special treat, like at a party. So number 3 would really be way too much fat. And even though I needed to gain weight, it wasn't really helping me to eat huge amounts of nuts, seeds, and avocado when I first began. I would sometimes sit and eat like a cup to 2 cups of nuts, not realizing how much fat I was taking in. I used to love the combination of sunflower seeds and raisins. And I would just sit there snacking on that all evening. And I was taking in a huge amount of fat, and wasn't really a good thing for me. And I didn't understand why I was feeling sluggish, and also why I was congested. When I eat too many nuts and seeds, I get very, very congested. And I've seen people who are also really congested and don't realize why. And nuts and seeds and avocado, as much as I believe that we need to have a minimal amount of fat in our diet, if you eat too much of that, it will slow you down and take away your energy. So that was really mistake number 3. I still eat nuts, seeds, and avocado. I love them. But I eat them in small amounts. And I do a raw food coaching program where I have delicious dressings and raw food entrees and party food, but with minimal amounts of nuts and seeds and avocado. They're tasty. They're loaded with healthy plant fats, but fat is fat, and we shouldn't be eating huge amounts of it. The number 4 of the mistakes was dehydration. When I first went raw 24 years ago, I was very excited about eating all the foods that I had eaten when I was eating a mainstream diet, and also when I was vegan, because I was vegan for about 4 to 5 years before going to raw food. And so I wanted to make my pizzas and my lasagnas, and I wanted to make things in the dehydrator. It was like my alternative oven. And so I made all these wonderful pies and cakes and pizzas and breads. And I was taking out the water when I dehydrated so much food. And even my kids were saying to me, Mom, like, why would you go to raw food and then dehydrate everything? Like, it didn't make sense to them, and after a while I realized that it didn't make sense for me and for my health also, because one of the major premises of eating healthfully on raw food is to keep the water content in your food. Our blood and our cellular tissues are about 72% water, so why would we want to take out all that water? Dehydration is fun, and it's a great thing to integrate, but not to have it every day as a part of your main meal. And so that was number 4. And then the last one, number 5, I would say, is sleep. All right. Now, when I first started raw food, I was getting 8 hours of sleep or so an evening, going to bed. And after I went raw, I had heard from people that they didn't need to get as much sleep, that you could get by with sometimes even 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours, and that you could get a lot more work done that way. And since at a certain point I started to write my first book, Creating Healthy Children, and I loved having that extra time not sleeping, I got very little sleep. And that caught up to me pretty fast. So the following year, after I went raw, I'd say like I went raw in 1994. In 1995, I was pretty sleep deprived at that point, and it was beyond catching up. So it did take me a long time to get my sleep and my energy, my circadian rhythms balanced. And so I do recommend getting enough sleep, and certainly not going to sleep after midnight. That's still a problem for me. I still work on that. I tend to do a lot of my work at night, and I'm really trying to shift that to earlier in the day and have your evening be about eating your food and then having the next 4 hours to just relax and be with your family and not eat and get ready for bed and get good sleep. And I did notice that when I was eating earlier in the day that I did get more sleep when I ate my heavier meals earlier. So those are my main mistakes that I made, and I do get more sleep now. I do not get 4 to 6 hours. I get more like 8 hours most of the time. And so I think it's important what you do most of the time. So I hope that my earlier mistakes will help those of you who are coming to raw food to really give it a chance, because you'll find that your energy and your health and your happiness all increase when you go to a healthy, high raw or totally raw food lifestyle. Thank you so much, and it would be great if you would like this video, comment any of the mistakes that you've made. I'd love to hear, and also please subscribe and share this video with others who might also like to have this information about how to avoid mistakes when going to a healthy raw food lifestyle. Thank you, and this is Karen Ramsey signing off.